Chapter 12 and a half. Black rain on windows, biting lips to quiet tears, fear and loneliness. Jessie paced in her room from wall to wall. She circled. It was dark inside and out. She hadn't turned a light on. She was alone with too much. Her fear, her aloneness, her knowing what she had done and what she hadn't done. It all crowded in around her until there was no more space in the room for it all, and she threw open the door and ran down the hall and out the front door and up the street through sideways rain. She left his house an hour ago, but now she was running back against the wind. She opened the screen door on the front porch, but before she knocked, the front door opened and Mark's mom stood there. "Jess, I was coming to get you. You didn't answer the phone. There was a call." "What?" "Someone called the tip line. We know where Mark is." Mark's mom hesitated. There was no smile on her mouth, no shining in her eyes. Her face was painted with the dark colors of worry. "What? That's good, right? It's good, isn't it?" His mom looked past her at the darkness, the pelting rain, the whipping wind. She bit her bottom lip. "No, honey, it isn't." Rain dripped down her neck. Her lungs caught at fearful breaths. Hopeful heart broken. Chapter 13. 6 miles to go. I leapt forward while Bo was still chewing on the ice with his paws. When my stomach hit the ground, his nose was just vanishing over the edge. I slid on my belly, my arms stretched out, my fingers reaching. My cheeks scraped on ice like asphalt. There was no time to scream. My hands were dead numb and inside thick gloves. I felt his body dimly rushing past my clumsy fingers. With every little thing living inside me, I closed my fingers onto iron claws and prayed they would find something to hold. My fingers were too numb to tell me anything, but one arm burned. It burned with a heavy, wiggling weight. Caught. I lifted my cheek from the ice. The burning arm was lost over the edge up to the shoulder. I raised my head to see Bo dangling down over darkness and death. 3 of my lifeless fingers were caught in his collar, but barely. He shook and wrestled, terrified and strangling. His body jerked and twisted, and he would shake himself loose and fall forever. I pulled and grunted, the camera still strapped around my neck, pressed like a rock-knuckled fist against my chest. My fingers would give way at any moment. "I can do it, Bo," I moaned. "I can hold on. I'm not giving up." Bo still twisted and shook. "I'm strong enough." I started to pull him up inch by inch. My arm muscles screamed. A gust of wind bowled into me like a charging bull. My 3 fingers, weak and numb, gave out. "No!" I screamed as Bo slipped from my grasp. He plunged down into the killing darkness of the crevasse. For a moment our eyes locked. I looked into Bo's eyes, one brown and one green. His face plummeted down from me. Time stopped. Bo hung frozen motionless, my empty hand still stretched toward him. All the world stopped moving. I was trapped in the moment that I lost my dog forever. Then I took a breath and I let it out. Bo still hung there in midair, looking up at me. A bluster of wind blew a swirl of snow down into the crevasse, and Bo remained frozen above the endless blackness. Time wasn't standing still. Only Bo was. I blinked and squinted into the shadows. Bo was stuck. The walls of the crevasse narrowed into a thin gap and a few feet from the top, and then they widened out below again. Bo was squeezed between the 2 sides. My heart froze. I read about this. Climbers have fallen into crevasses and gotten stuck like that before, pinched between the walls of ice. At first they're relieved they didn't fall all the way down, but then their body heat melts the ice walls, and they slide down a little farther, and then they melt the walls again and slide down farther. As the crack gets skinnier and skinnier, they keep sliding down, and the ice begins to squeeze them. They slide until they're wedged in. No, I gasped down into Bo's eyes, looking desperately at me. No. Dogs die, but not my dog. Not like that. Not my dog that exploded out of the darkness to chase the wolves away. My dog that pulled me from a river. My dog that followed me up a mountain in a blizzard. My dog that tried to jump over death because I told him to. My dog. I tried to stretch down, but I knew it was hopeless. He was wedged a good 6 feet down, way past my groping fingers. Bo whined. He tried to bark, and then he slid a few inches lower. Hold still, Bo, I hollered. Then I remembered the rope in my backpack and Bo's favorite game, tug of war. I jumped back and grabbed my backpack and opened it and yanked the coiled rope from inside and dove back to the edge of the crevasse. I circled a few loops around my waist to make sure I had enough slack to reach him, and then I tied a knot at the very end. Okay, buddy, I shouted down to his terrified face. Tug of war time, okay? Do you want to play? Bo whined back and slid a couple of terrible inches away. I dug my knees into the crusty snow as best as I could and threw the end of the rope down in the crevasse. It dangled in front of Bo's face. He didn't grab it. I shook it in front of his nose, and he jerked his head up to keep it away. No, Bo, grab it, tug of war! My voice was high and panicked. It sounded strange in my ears, like I was hearing some other kid screaming, but Bo's eyes dropped even farther into the crack. My muscles shook and my belly tossed and surged. Hot tears sprang into my eyes. Now, Bo, I shrieked. Grab it, boy. Grab the rope, please. The rope bounced in front of his nose. Bo snapped with his jaws and grabbed it. I felt the weight jerk around my waist. Yes, good boy. Good boy. Hold on. I started to pull. He wouldn't budge at first, but there was no way I was giving up. I heaved back and slid loose from the ice's deadly grip. Hand over hand, I hauled him up, my back and arms stinging, but not slowing for a second. Bo's teeth were locked onto the rope, and I prayed he wouldn't lose his grip or let go. When he was almost to the top, a mere foot from the rim, I pulled myself up to my feet in one final lift and fell backward. Bo's head and front legs pulled over the ice. Lying on my back, I could see him between my feet, scrambling on the ice with his front paws. I yanked the rope with all that I had left in my arms, and Bo, still clenching the rope between his teeth, popped up out of the crevasse and onto my chest. I lay on my back, gasping, great empty breaths to the sky. Bo shook himself and whined and clambered on top of me. His weight pressed what little air I had out of my lungs, but I didn't push him off. I wrapped my arms tightly around my dog and hugged him and closed my eyes. I almost lost you, buddy. I wheezed into his fur. I felt his tail slapping against me. I'm sorry. I said the words, and there were hard tears in my throat. I'm so sorry. Once I said the words, there was no stopping, and I buried my face into my dog's icy coat, and I cried. Big, breaking sobs that shook us both. I tried to breathe between sobs, but the air was so thin I couldn't get much, so I panted and cried, choking on my tears. I was so sorry for so much. Finally, I sniffed and shivered and slid Bo off of me. I rolled over and pulled myself up to my knees. I wiped the tears from my eyes with my sleeve so they wouldn't freeze to the ice on my skin. The howling darkness was huge around me, like the shadow of a giant's foot held just over my head. I knelt in the blackness and the ice, and I looked upward, squinting against the flying ice. And then it happened, what I'd been waiting for. The wind roared to a high pitch. The snow came sideways and a bit with stinging flakes of ice at my face. And then a breathless silence, a stillness like a dream. The blowing gusts of snow gave way. They broke and parted, and it was there, huge and beautiful, and so close I could reach out and touch it. I knelt alone in the snow with death all around me, and I saw the mountain. Not alone, Bo was beside me, of course, and the mountain was before me, white and shining, painted impossibly bright by the moonlight. shocking, unmovable white against the black of the sky and the storm and the darkness. Mount Rainier is an awesome mountain. It is fierce and it is proud. It is almost angry against the sky. My mouth dropped open. My heart fell down into an icy crevasse and came back up flying. My hands fumbled at the zipper of my coat. I yanked at my clothes and pulled my camera free and held it up to everything I'd been seeing. I didn't know if the mountain, so grand, could fit in the small frame of the camera, but I held it up and I pointed it and pressed my gloved finger on the button. I couldn't even tell if the picture had been taken. Maybe my finger was so numb inside its glove I hadn't pressed the button all the way down. Maybe the electronics inside the camera had long since frozen in the bitter cold, but I held the camera up and I saw through its little square window the mountain I had come to find and conquer. It was weird how something could look so close and so far away at the same time. Like I could reach out and touch it, but I could walk all day and night and never get there. My breath huffed out of me, and I dropped a hand to Bo's head. He was standing, as always, beside me. "I don't want to die," I said. I looked down at Bo and talked through my tears. "I don't want to die, Bo. Not here." As soon as I said it out loud, in the darkness, with the hugeness of the mountain before me, all the anger and aloneness that had haunted my heart blew away like the clouds from the mountaintop. I thought of the waitress at the diner that first dark night away from home. I thought of how she tried to help me, and I'd been too angry. I wished I could go back. I thought of the waitress and her helping, and I lifted one foot up and planted it in the snow. I thought of the kid who'd beat me up, thought of his eyes when he had seen my head, my baldness, and he'd left me money. It was my money, maybe, but I was a stranger with a bloody face, and he'd given something to me that he didn't have to. I set another foot in the snow and rose to standing. I thought of the three angels singing their songs in a hot kitchen on an icy morning. I thought of their voices, and I could almost hear them and almost smell the food that they pressed into my hands, and I took another step forward. No, not forward, a step backward, a step down the mountain, a step toward home. I thought of little Shelby sitting on the bus on her way to see her daddy, hurt and angry, but still wanting to make friends with some weird skinny kid in the seat behind her. 2 more steps, tripping but still moving down the mountain. Bo stumbled shivering beside me. I thought of the shuttle bus driver who figured out that I was a thief, but who was going to stop on his own time and give me a ride home. I took another step. I thought of Wesley. I thought of his son, far away and dead. I thought of the sandwich he'd given me and the music on the radio and the smell of cigar smoke in his eyes when he dropped me off. I thought of what Wesley had said. We're all in this together. And I kept walking. I thought of my mom and my dad, of long nights in hospitals, of quiet crying when they thought I was asleep, of brave smiles to cheer me up. I thought of all of it, and I ached with it all. I thought of Jess, the best of best friends, the faithful visitor, the warmest smile, the sitting beside beds and not having to talk, just being there, the secret keeper. I thought of the last words I'd heard her shout as I was hanging up. I need you. I didn't have to think of Bo. He still panted beside me, a friend who always was, who followed anywhere, who pulled me out of freezing rivers and away from crevasses I didn't see, who jumped over death to stay with me. I didn't feel alone on the mountain anymore, not at all. I could feel them all crowded around me. I thought I could do it alone, but I couldn't, and I didn't want to. There was no such thing as alone. That's the truth. I was breathing as hard as I could, big mouth open breaths, like a fish at the bottom of a boat. My lungs still felt empty. There was not enough air to hold me up, but I kept going. I trudged downhill alongside the crevasse. There was no way I was going to make Bo jump that again. I'd head down the crevasse until it ended, then go around it. Downhill was the important part. I wasn't cold anymore. The wind still pushed and pulled at me with slapping hands, and it still wormed up my sleeves and down my neck. Snow still stung my face. My feet and hands and my nose were still numb, but I wasn't cold. And I wasn't angry, not even a little bit. Here's what I get: everything. Taking my weak little steps through the snow and down the mountain, I got it all. I thought of my sickness, all my anger, all my fear, all that was just darkness from just the storm. I got lost in it, but there was always the other side of the storm and the people who get you there. All the world's a storm, I guess, and we all get lost sometimes. We look for mountains in the clouds to make it all seem like it's worth it, like it means something, and sometimes we see them and we keep going. I kept going for hours, maybe. I have no idea. I just know it got darker and warmer, and I kept going. The wind got so strong it almost blew me down the mountain, but I kept going. I couldn't hardly hold a thought in my head, but I kept going, right up until I didn't. I stumbled a lot that last long march along the crevasse, every few steps really, and I got back up and kept going. But there came a time when I stumbled and lay in the snow with the wind howling over me, and I didn't get back up. For a while I didn't even realize that I hadn't gotten up. My brain was long gone from cold and exhaustion and the thin oxygen-starved air. But I'd been walking numb like a ghost, with only faces from my memory in front of me. It was only when I felt Bo nudging me with his nose that I blinked and saw that I was lying down. There was enough snow over my outstretched arm that I could tell I'd been lying there for a few minutes. I squinted into the windy dark. Just ahead through the snow, I could see a darker shadow. It was a ledge, a little cliff, with a dark hollow underneath. I pulled myself up to my hands and knees. I need to rest, I told Bo through my lips that were so dead from the cold it just sounded like a groan mumble. Just for a little bit. He whined back. It sounded as weak as my mumble. I crawled toward the hollow. Bo walked beside me so close, he was almost underneath me. I loved that dog. There was a little space over the underhang out of the wind. It was probably still bitter cold, but I was long past feeling it. The space just felt soft and still and quiet. Bo curled up beside me, right against my side, and laid his head across my chest. He was shivering. I put my arm over him. I thought about my notebook, but it was no use. My brain couldn't count syllables, and my hand couldn't hold a pencil, and maybe there was nothing more to say. I tried to fish my camera out from under my layers, but the numbness now was past my fingers and through my hands and starting up my arms. I lay back in the darkness and breathed in the cold, shallow air. I blinked. Sometimes I blinked for a long time, and memories flashed through my mind, and faces, all good things. Those those are what made it through the storm. I smiled in the darkness. I almost made it, I mumbled to Bo, through whether I meant to the top or back home. I wasn't even sure. At some point, I woke up with a start and realized that Bo wasn't under my arm. I jolted up in the blackness and looked around. There was wind and there was dark and there was snow, but there was no Bo. My dog had left me. I swallowed once, hard and hot, and lay back down. It had been my plan. I would climb the mountain. I probably wouldn't come back. If I died, Bo would find his way back. He was a dog, and a smart one. He would know enough to leave me, and know enough to follow our path back down to people who would help him. It was my plan. But it was still hard. Hard to be left behind. Hard that he left me there, alone. But I wanted him to go. I wanted him to live. That's the truth. Goodbye, buddy, I whispered into the storm. I don't think any sound came out of my mouth, but my lips moved. Good luck. I love you, Bo. The wind closed around me in the darkness. I was alone, but not really at all. My face smiled through the cold as I thought of my dog climbing down the mountain into open arms, helping hands, warm places. And I thought of him coming home to Jess, to my mom and dad so far away, but so close, right there with me. I smiled through the cold, and I closed my eyes to die.